the mic on? Yeah, perfect. Okay, good morning, everybody. Glad everyone can make it here on the first session of the day. So just to remind everybody, this is JAM session 354, and we'll be talking about the Android runtime and developing Android runtime apps, specifically around BlackBerry 10. So let's get started here. So what I wanted to cover in this presentation is we'll go over the basics of the Android runtime, kind of the 5-minute overview for anyone that's not familiar with what it is and what we can do. We'll go over what are the features in BlackBerry 10, so what's new that's been added since the PlayBook release. We'll do a quick demo, and what I want it to do for the demo is I'll show you what I think is a really good example of an Android app that was ported and uses pieces that are integrated into the OS, so you don't have the experience that it's an Android app. You think it's an integrated native BlackBerry 10 application. And then we'll go into some of the development basics, looking at the different options that we have for tooling, what are the advantages and disadvantages of each tool, as well as looking at then going into App World. So what do you need to do? What do you need to have ready once you get to the vendor portal to submit your application? And then at the end, we can take questions and answers. So to start off, what is the Android runtime? Everyone in the room, does everyone develop Android apps, or has anyone developed Android apps? So pretty much everybody. Great, great. So I guess everyone's then familiar with the Android runtime. Have you done PlayBook apps or BlackBerry 10 apps? So raise your hand if you've done PlayBook app. Okay, BlackBerry 10 app. Okay, and then you're thinking about doing a BlackBerry 10 app? Okay, I want to see all those hands up. Okay, very good, very good. Okay, so I'll go over quick the overview because you probably are familiar with it. So the Android runtime, it's the Android open source framework built upon Gingerbread 2.33. You would have noticed from the keynote, the general session, that we've announced that we're actually working on bringing up to a newer version of Android. We're currently working on Jelly Bean 4.1, which is hopefully going to be coming out sometime later this year. But currently, right now, we're on Gingerbread. And works on BlackBerry PlayBook and BlackBerry 10. So this allows Android apps to be ported and installed and integrated within the OS. So when we talk about integration, it's not anything else you have to add to your application. It's what we've done on our side to give you the best BlackBerry 10 experience your application can have. And again, I'll go over some of these features of what those integration points are. So with the runtime, there are a couple points to make about compatibility and limitations. So today we have about 70% compatibility with the Gingerbread 2.33 API set. So about 70% of applications within the Android marketplace would convert with either no changes or very minimal changes to have it running. Some things that are not compatible today are so anything that uses like Bluetooth APIs, NFC APIs, Google Maps. Unfortunately, those are not supported. Also, another point to note is that Android apps are limited to the personal perimeter, meaning there's no enterprise support. So with the BlackBerry 10, how we have the idea of balance where you have two different partitions if you're an enterprise customer, Android apps stay on the personal side. So for the full compatibility list, you can head over to our website on our Android page, and you can see all the details of specifically what is not supported, and then we have an area for support, the exceptions of support. So I'll go over those in a second of some of the things that we support, but you have to do some changes. So looking at what's new for BlackBerry 10, looking at the features and some of our usability and compatibility. So with what we've done on BlackBerry 10 was basically take everything that we had available on the PlayBook and then further integration into the OS were available. So one of those points was being able to interact with the new BlackBerry 10 virtual keyboard. So Android apps can leverage that keyboard with the text prediction, so the same experience that native apps would have. And you don't have to do anything to your application, that just works out of the box. We also have support for notifications. So if your application posts notifications, those will be shown in BlackBerry Hub as well as a splat within or on your application icon. And we've also added multimedia sync. So any content generated from your Android application, native applications will see that as well. So any pictures or videos, stuff like that, all native applications will have access to that created media. So looking at some of the integration points that we've added as well. So we have a lot of new intent support within BlackBerry 10. So items like being able to share. So we don't have the full implementation of the share framework that native apps have, but we do have specific items like email and SMS, and I'll show an example of that. So if you have content within your app that you want to share, you'll have the option of sharing it via email or SMS, and then the card service that is used on top of that, you don't have to do anything to your application to obtain that. It's just something that's natively added. You also have the ability of creating calendar appointments from your Android app that just uses our native BlackBerry 10 calendar card service. Adding information to contacts. So currently right now we support items as being able to select a new contact or create a new contact and adding phone number and email address when you're modifying or adding a contact. And again, that uses the native contact card service. We also have the contact picker. So if you have an application and you want to select a contact to either share information with or to bring into your application, that's available. We now launch into the native browser for URL links as opposed to bringing up the Android browser. And then dialer support. So if you have a phone number presented in your Android application, that'll launch the phone application to call that number. And then as well as native file picker. So if you're trying to open a picture, so say like you have a text messaging application and you want to share a picture, it'll invoke the native card picker or file picker. So looking at some of the APIs that we added for support, or I guess that we added support into BlackBerry 10. So we now have the full camera support. So we have camera API, flash API, so you can actually control the flash if you want to make say like a torch application or a light application. You also have autofocus API, which is pretty useful for QR scanner applications. We support in-app payments, so that takes the in-app payments API that is on Android today and it maps it to ours. So in-app payments are processed through BlackBerry World. And I have some more information on that in a second. We also added push support, whereas on Android, the C2 DM or GCM service. Support for sensors, ambient light sensor, proximity sensor, and we've added initial support for telephony APIs. I put an asterisk there because not everything is supported. Some of the SMS managers are not currently available. But we've added to APIs so you're able to get information on what carrier you're on if you're roaming, that sort of information.
Will that be extended?
Yeah, we are looking to add more support as it becomes available in future releases. Yeah, it's just can only add so much in the initial release. Okay, so that describes, I guess, the initial release of what we have with the Z10. And so what's coming with our keyboard devices, the Q10, and what's in the 10.1 SDK. So we didn't want to add a whole bunch of new APIs and separate applications to be different. So really, in this support, it's supporting the form factor. So it's supporting the screen resolution, the 720 by 720, and supporting of a physical keyboard. We'll also be adding the ability to do keyboard shortcuts in there, so that'll be coming, I believe, in the next drop of the 10.1 beta. So if your application, if you want to leverage using the new keypad, you can actually use shortcut keys to control certain functions in your application. Okay, so before I talked about some of the limitations that we had within the Android runtime, so I wanted to go over how to address some of these limitations. So currently today we don't have support for Google Maps API, but there are options that you can do to change your application if you want to use some sort of map service. So currently today, what we recommend is using basically WebView web service map. So basically pulling up a web view of that. And we have the full details of the solution available from our support page. And this is just an example of how you would do that. So basically you're firing up a web view and you're pointing it to your map service that you would want. So whether that's Google Maps, Bing, some other map provider service. And it's not a true replacement for the Google Map API, but it does get map services to your end user. And I should note that we are looking to bring map support into the platform. We're just working through the details. So that's something we are working on this year. Second one is when we talk about in-app payments. So I had mentioned before, in-app payments are supported through BlackBerry World. You can use the same digital SKUs that you have created for your application. So I guess in Android it's item IDs. And so this is just when you become a vendor in our BlackBerry World and you go to create your in-app purchases, you can actually just call them the same thing with your digital SKUs, and then you don't have to change any of your code. So when the application is in App World, you just register your items, similarly process as you would with Google Marketplace, except all the payments are processed through our system because that's where the application lives. There's a couple small items to remember here. So we only support one purchase at a time, no concurrent transactions. Refunds are not supported. Subscriptions are not supported, but there are ways around that. So you could have an in-app purchase item that is basically your controlled subscription. So on your back-end servers, you can say, okay, well, if you bought this item, I'll give you access for a certain amount of time, whether that's monthly or yearly, however you want to do your services. Also, transaction responses are not signed. So if you have back-end server that's handling both Android applications that live in Google Marketplace and BlackBerry World, you'll just have to check what OS the application is reporting and not check for the transaction response on BlackBerry devices. And again, if you go to our API support page, all the details are there of recommended approaches and details within the App World vendor portal of how you'd set that all up. Looking at if you wanted to use push services. So the push support for cloud-to-device messaging, C2DM, which is actually the older version of what Google uses, and now the new version, Google Cloud Messaging, both are supported, but it's used through our push system. So there's a couple extra things you need to do, not within your application code itself, but when you're packaging your application, there's an extra step that you have to do here. So the first is registering with our push services. And again, all this information is on our support website of the steps that you need to do. So you register for our push services. You create a configuration file that you then package with your application. In this configuration file, it's just information around the push service and I guess the server that it's going to be hitting rather than going through the Android servers. So you also have to specify a push as a requirement permission in your bar file manifest. And again, this is a pretty simple step, and we explain how to do that online. And that goes the same for every application that uses push. It's not just limited to Android runtimes. And then on your push server side, there's a slight change in the format you'd be sent for BlackBerry applications. So again, all the full details are explained on our support page. And it's not a lot of changes. It's mainly just, I guess, more of the structure and the registration process that's a little bit different. So what I wanted to do now is go into a quick demo here. And I had just one example of a real, well, at least what I thought was a really good Android application that we have in our BlackBerry world. And it highlights some of the points of integration that you would have within the OS that you'd get for free. So I'm not sure if you have heard of this application, but it's called Tap2. And it's a really good, I guess, news application, RSS feeds. And I don't know if anyone has seen this application before and if you even realized it was an Android port, but as you see, it looks like a native application. You minimize it, you have your screenshot of the active frame. So everything works here as you would expect it. And one of the things I wanted to show you is the share framework settings. So if we go into the setting page, I could say I wanted to share this with one of my friends here. And you'll have the option of sharing it with messages or SMS. And we are looking at fully supporting the share framework, where instead of seeing that particular screen, you'd see the one natively to BlackBerry. You'd have the full list of every single application shareable. But that, again, that's something that's probably coming in the Jelly Bean timeframe as well. But for here, I can just select messages, and you'll see that it starts composing a message with the information from the application. And then the other example I'll show is the same thing with that same application, but if I choose SMS, what you'll actually see here is the native card overlay on your application. And then I can just back out of there and go back to your Android application. So these are things that if you're using Share within your Android application, you don't have to do anything extra to have access to that. And it's just that little, I guess, extra usability that makes your application look native and feel native to the end users. One of the other things I wanted to highlight on BlackBerry 10 that we've changed is some of the navigation for Android applications. So if you see here that we don't have the bottom control bar open, but if I swipe down from the top of the top of the device, I can pull up that bar on the bottom. And this is the Android control bar that we use. And the reason why we have to use this is on most Android devices, they have either fixed buttons or there's an OS fixed bar, which allows you to control going in and out of settings and going back, which, again, we don't have the same part of controls on BlackBerry 10 because there's no physical buttons. So this is what we have on the bottom, which, again, you can hide it or pin it, and has a dedicated back button, or you can do a swipe gesture from the bottom bezel to go back in your application. But one of the things I wanted to highlight is we've now added an extra menu or settings button, which is the 3 icons right there that I'm highlighting. So when you tap that, it'll invoke the settings, or the menu if you have on your application. Before, we used to have it that you had to swipe down from the top and it would show that. But we found that this was more in line with what users were going to be expecting with BlackBerry 10, expecting more content to be shown through that settings or menu button. So that's how we've mapped that. And again, you can go back to tap that. And then again, if you want to show and hide the bar, you can just swipe down from the top of the device. One of the other things I'll just show here quickly is just the integration with the keyboard. So you see that it pulls up the native BlackBerry 10 keyboard for when you're wanting to type on there. So that's just one example of a really good, what I think, at least what I believe is a good port in our store. At the end of the presentation, I do have some other examples, some success stories of really good Android ports, and kind of getting that feel of what they should look like, how you can do tweaks to make them look almost native on BlackBerry 10. Okay, so now I wanted to go over some of our basic kind of development steps. And I guess just before I get into this, of the people in the room that have used or have done applications for the Android runtime, I guess who here uses our online converting tool or has used our online converting tool? Okay, a couple. Who here would have used our Eclipse plugin? Okay. And then anyone using our command line tools? Okay, a couple. Now also, when you're doing your development, were you guys using a physical device? Anyone using real hardware? And then the other one would be who's using the simulator? Okay, almost half and half. It's good to know. Okay, so first, for everyone that doesn't know, we do have an online converting tool. And so we always try to keep this up to date with our latest plugin available. And what this allows you to do is quickly go through and upload an APK file, and you just have to point it to your Android SDK folder on your computer. And without actually having to do anything extra, it will quickly verify your application, whether it will work or not. And if it does pass verification, it'll convert it to a bar file online for you and even sign it, assuming you have your developer signing keys. So it's a really, I guess, quick first step to see if your application will port, and then you can output a bar file and start your initial testing on a real device or a simulator before you'd upload that to App World. Now, if it doesn't convert, that's where we'll then ask you to go to one of our tools to figure out why isn't it converting, and I'll explain the error codes in a second here. If the error code that was generated, is it something that can be ignored because it's really not detrimental, or is it something that's a showstopper? So giving you an example screen, so if you were to use our online tool and you uploaded your APK file and you see this screen, this is a good sign because your application is going to work for BlackBerry 10 and BlackBerry PlayBook. So you're off to the races and you can submit that for both devices. You'll also see a variation of the screen if it only supports PlayBook and it's not compatible for BlackBerry 10, or I guess that wouldn't be an option. If it's the other way around, if it supports BlackBerry 10 and not PlayBook because you're using an API that was recently added, you'll see that as well. And if you see this screen, then this is where we have to step through some of our, I guess, troubleshooting to figure out what your application is using that's not supported. So if you're using the online tool and you see this screen, that means you have an API that is not currently fully supported. So one thing to note, and you can see it down here in the corner, and this is just an example because we do actually support camera and telephony stuff now, but you'll see an impact score. So the impact scores we have, it's basically from 1 to 5. 1 being a low, mild, it'll likely still work, but just note that this permission or feature won't be supported. And then a 5 typically means, yeah, this isn't going to run, don't bother. So, and I'll go over what typical warnings are for applications that will still run, but it's just a point to note that the particular feature is not supported, and then ones that are severe that it won't run and you'll have to change something. So again, apps that have warnings that are less than a severity 2 level typically operate fine. It's just whatever feature it's reporting on won't work. So if you had a permission, or common one I see is if you're trying to invoke back to the home screen from your application, that's not supported. So it just won't do anything in your application, but it won't crash it. Moving on to the second tool is our plugin for Eclipse, which is the BlackBerry plugin for our Android development tools. So here, what we've really tried to do is make it as simple as possible to extend out your Eclipse environment. So minimal footprint onto existing plugin tools, and it really just gives you a BlackBerry tools menu item, which allows you to add what we call BlackBerry nature to your project. So you would develop your project just as you normally would, but then when you're ready to bring it over to BlackBerry and convert it, that's where you can verify your application and then test it either in the simulator or real device and then sign it. So good thing to note here is you're targeting BlackBerry just as you would as any other Android device, and you can debug applications on the physical BlackBerry device or a simulator, again, just as you would on any Android device. So we recently just released our 1.5 Gold SDK, and then we put out a minor update, the 1.51. So a couple things to note. What's new in this release? We added support for Windows 8, Mountain Lion, and Linux Ubuntu 12.04. We also added support for ADT 21.0.1, but that's just we tested on there and made sure that everything worked fine. And we are committed to making sure that we're always functional on the latest Google ADT code line. We also added some improvements to how we handle icon sizes now that we're supporting BlackBerry 10 and PlayBook. So basically, the idea here is on BlackBerry 10, we're expecting 114 by 114 icon sizes, and then on PlayBook, we're expecting a lower resolution. I believe it's 86 by 86 on the PlayBook. So within this release, if you include high-resolution icons, the 114 or higher, it'll use those for BlackBerry 10. If you have lower resolution icons, it'll use that for the PlayBook. And if you use a resolution icon in the XH DPI folder of 96, that'll both upconvert and downconvert for both PlayBook and BlackBerry 10. So you don't need to manage two different code streams if your application works fine on both platforms. We also added support for bar manifest editions. So if you're when you're converting your application, there are some times where you're wanting to add a couple more lines into modifying the actual bar file manifest. But that's probably more of an advanced feature on there, and there's information on our website of the particulars of how to use that. So the last tool option that I wanted to go over quickly here is our command line SDK. So this one gives you a lot of versatility from just running things from a command line script. So if you're not always using Eclipse, or if you have a whole bunch of projects that you've already developed and you have APK files for, the command line tools pretty simple for batch converting things, batch signing things. So pretty easy 4-step process. We have different tools available. So we have an APK to bar verifier. So that's the first step you can run your application through, and that'll let you know any issues that you might have with your application. So it's the same thing as the online tool, where it's going to output your warning file. So you're going to get your different warnings for your application. And again, you can do this with you can do a batch processing of this. So if you have a folder of a whole bunch of applications, you can do this in one shot. Second step is if your verifier is successful, you can go through and actually package your APK file. So that's the second step, or APK to bar, and that's pretty straightforward. Here we're basically just taking your APK file, using that command line utility, and it'll produce you a bar file. The next step from there is if you actually want to sign it for distribution on a device or to send it to App World, you need to sign it. So as we've explained, I guess on our website and stuff, you need to have your developer signing keys first. So if you haven't got developer signing keys, I recommend you go register for them today so you can start creating applications. And so then simple command line process, actually just take that bar file and sign it within our signing servers. And step 4 is actually just deploying it to a device or simulator for your testing. It's a BlackBerry deploy tool, which again isn't limited to Android applications, but it's included in our command line SDK. So quick couple steps there to get you up and running if you have already completed APK files and you just want to try and convert them. So this is something that I've added new this year, is going over some of our common verification errors. We do hear this a lot from developers that they're not quite sure. As soon as they see a warning or an error, they instantly stop and say, well, I guess I can't upload my application because it's not going to work. So I wanted to just talk about this for a little bit. So when you actually run verification on your application, we said we might see some warnings or errors, but it's good to note what these are, and let's break them down. So in the first point, these aren't errors. This is just warning you that a feature you're using requires a minimum OS level. So some examples here is the first one, using feature camera. So it's using Android Hardware Camera API. And you'll see printed after it, minimum OS version, and it's going to tell you a version. So we added this in PlayBook OS 2.1. So although it's printed in the warning file, it's just letting you know that when you go to submit this application for App World, you must target PlayBook OS 2.1 or higher, so BlackBerry 10 as well. The second one is a permission issue. So this one is using the C2DM permission or push permission. And again, it's letting you know that you need to have a minimum OS version of BlackBerry 10, OS 10. And if you're using push and you're using our online conversion tool or our command line tools, you'll see this warning. And even if I guess this is where if you see this warning, that's fine. Your application will work, but this is where you have to go into that push registration service. You'll have to do a couple extra steps to actually have your push service functional, but by no means does that mean that error that you can't get your application to work. It's just letting you know that you're using push services, and that's why it's a warning there. And the last one, the telephony, it's the same thing. You're needing a minimum OS version. So the last point there is talking about which features are not supported. So if you're converting an app and you have an impact score of 5 and you're seeing the first line that says native code, that's unfortunately not supported. So whether, I guess, you've intrinsically added native support or not, sometimes there are extra libraries, depending on how you built your application, that are simple, relatively simple native code libraries, but they're not supported just of how the runtime operates today. The second one is, once in a while I see people that have this library called Android Test Runner. It's not supported. So I'm not exactly sure. One of our Android devs is in the audience, so at the end of the show I might get him to explain exactly what that is and why it isn't supported. But I'm not even sure. Dan, is that even something you can take out of your application?
I have no idea what that is.
No? Okay, never mind. And then stuff like uses packages. If you're using a package that's unsupported, so the classic example is Google Maps. That's unsupported. Now, depending on how you use Google Maps in your application still might work, but how you've tied into the maps won't. And earlier I explained that you could replace that with a map view depending on how integrated you are to Google Maps. And the last one we see a lot is if you've targeted the wrong SDK version, it doesn't necessarily stop you from submitting your app, but sometimes we get weird results if you're building on an unsupported SDK version. So we support SDK version 10, which is what Android Gingerbread 2.33 uses. So if you're building a project for something higher than that, there could be some weird results when you actually go to run it on the device. So you'll see that, and it's only an impact level 1, but it is one of those things where we recommend you actually just targeting your project for OS 10, or SDK version 10, to make sure everything's working as expected. Okay, so now we've looked at some of the tools and some of the common verification errors. Now we're going to get into signing. So I had said this before. You need signing keys to be able to sign these completed application and bar files, and this is a requirement in order to get your application into BlackBerry World. So you also, when you get your signing keys, you can generate what we call debug tokens, which you can install within any of your hardware. So a PlayBook or a Dev-Alpha or BlackBerry 10 device. So you don't always have to sign your application. You can load unsigned versions of that application to test and debug on your development unit. But then when you're going to submit it to App World, you have to sign it for release. So again, if you don't have signing keys today, you can go over to our website link to sign up for them, and these slides will be posted online, so you can grab that link after. So a little bit of a shout out to BlackBerry World here. So those of you that have not registered or are not vendors today, some quick information. It is absolutely free to register. So no registration, no submission fees, none, $0. It's absolutely free. It's a global marketplace, hundreds of countries worldwide. It's the 70-30 revenue share. So if you're doing paid applications, that's important to note. They support credit card, PayPal, and carrier billing. There's a full list of what carriers support carrier billing. So many of the Canadian, U.S. carriers and European carriers are starting to pick this up. And obviously have both free and paid catalogs, as well as integrated barcode scanning. So good for advertisements. You can actually put QR barcodes up of your application through on your websites or other marketing materials that will directly link to our storefront. So a couple items to note when you're actually going through the process to submit your application to BlackBerry World. So first off is you need to apply to become a member. So make sure you have your vendor account created. It's a relatively simple process, but there is a couple business days to actually get your account approved and generated. So once that's all completed, you obviously need an application. You need an application to submit. And the second thing, and a lot of people forget, is even if you have a simple application, come up with a great name for your application. That's also important too, because it makes it a little bit more noticeable and rememberable within our storefront. Also, be prepared to have really good descriptions and details of your applications. I can't tell you the amount of times when you're going through the app world and you see an interesting application and you click on it and there's 2-word description or 1-line description and you don't really know what it is and there's no screenshots, so the likelihood of having users download that becomes somewhat limited because they really don't know what they're getting. So make sure you have a full description of what your application does and some of the features of it. And also, so talking about the icons and screenshots, have a really, really good icon. So that's both for the device and the icon you'd see in the app for the BlackBerry World vendor portal. So that icon within BlackBerry World could be your app icon with maybe your vendor logo or company name, whatever you choose. And then add screenshots. Add a bunch of screenshots of your different features of your device. Make sure that they're screenshots of the application, not necessarily of the device. I know they don't like seeing device pictures. It's just they want to see the screenshot of the physical software. Also to remember for Android ports, and I see this all too much, please don't take a screenshot of it running on an actual Android device because users will know that, hey, this is an Android port. I can see the OS banner bar at the top. So if possible, take it from either a simulator screenshot on our platform or if you have hardware, do a screenshot there. I guess you could Photoshop the picture, but it calls out that it's an Android port, and a lot of users, for whatever reason, they have the experience that, the Android port applications, they're not native, so I don't want that. We know that's not true. We know Android runtime applications are great, so we want to entice the users to download those applications and experience just how good they are. And then finally, submit your application. So there's a link to our vendor portal sign up and login. So if you're working on your applications, you can go there and get all the extra details. So what I want to do to end off the presentation is go through some success stories that we had here. And so this is the first one I wanted to talk about. And this one actually, I guess, came from end of last year a little bit. And this is a great story. It was Pine Lake Communications on porting. They had a game for the Android marketplace called Cubifice, which it's kind of like a Tetris-like game. It's pretty addictive. It's a really simple arcade game. So they ported an existing OpenGL Android application. Took less than an hour to do. In fact, I think it was minutes to actually port it and then get it to test it. The key thing here is they were seeing more than 25 times the number of downloads in BlackBerry World than they were in Google Play. To the point that that's even continued where the developers were commenting that there's so much in Google Play that it's almost impossible to get your application up through the ranks unless you're spending a good amount of money marketing. So they were very pleased with the exposure that they saw in the BlackBerry world. So if you have existing Android applications that are in Google Play, and if you're not happy with how many downloads you're seeing and how much exposure you're seeing, getting into BlackBerry world right now is a great opportunity because new marketplace, new devices, you're starting from the starting line. You have a really good opportunity to make some money and get some app downloads there. So that was just one example, and what I wanted to do is pull out some other good success stories of applications that we have currently in BlackBerry world that are strong Android brands. And again, these are other examples of what I consider to be a good Android port. So I showed you Tap2. That was in our demo. Another one I wanted to bring up is Songza. So this is a great music application. I don't know if you've ever heard of Songza or used it, but it allows you to kind of have on-the-fly playlists for different songs that you want to hear, depending on what you're doing. So it's kind of mood-generated. If you're driving, if you're doing some chores, it'll create playlists on the fly for you and stream popular music. Some other examples is Deezer, which is another music service for streaming music, except this one's based upon albums and popular music. You can stream that. Another example is WordPress. It's a really good application for creating and managing blog content from your device. And the last one is an application called Photo Studio, which is a really cool little application for doing photo editing and being able to share those photos out once you're done. So those are just a couple examples of some popular applications that are in BlackBerry world today that are finding good success in our storefront. So lastly, just some tweets here that we see from developers talking about how quick and simple it was to port their application and the success that they're finding on our storefront compared to some of the others. So just before we finish here, I wanted to point you for some more information. So again, these slides will be available online, but all your information for Android runtime details can be found at our developer website. So it's developer.blackberry.com/Android. If you haven't been there, I suggest you take a look because we have all the information, the latest downloads for our tooling and simulators, latest documentation for all of our tooling, detailing all the steps involved with signing your applications. Also, we have our API support page, which details all the unsupported features that you would have within Android, as well as the extended support that we bring into things like in-app payments and push. We also have a roadmap online. So if you check out the roadmap, we do post upcoming features from time to time. Right now, that's where we have the information about the upcoming roadmap item for Jelly Bean. There'll be more details as it comes. What we can say to that right now is that we're looking to bring up Jelly Bean, bringing in all the support that we currently have on the platform, and then depending on time, we'll look to what net new functionality and APIs we can extend from Jelly Bean into the BlackBerry 10 platform. So there'll be some more information coming on that in the coming weeks and months. Yeah, and so then the bottom link there is our Getting Started tutorial if Android runtime development is something new. So a couple points just before we finish off here and take some questions. Don't forget to download the mobile conference guide application from BlackBerry World if you haven't done so already. Remember to complete your survey in the conference portal on your BlackBerry 10 device or mobile guide. I believe they're saying if you complete your survey, and there's a gift in the registration area once you do that. Yeah, and that's what they're saying. So yeah, once you fill out your conference survey, you can come and get your gift. And then just everyone, thank you for attending and coming out for the first early morning session of the day. So if you guys have any questions, I'll take them at this time.
Hi, I have an app which uses the Android NetStats API, and I was just wondering, in your implementation of the NetStats API, will I get the statistics for the real machine or the Android virtual machine?
NetStats.
It gives you the data usage on different networks, so you can see the total bytes over Wi-Fi, total bytes.
Okay. I don't believe that's supported as of yet. I know that's something that's on my roadmap to bring in support for the stats for network usage, because that has been asked for, but that's not currently supported today.
Okay.
Well, I have several questions, as people will indulge me. The first one is online. There's the API list of unsupported APIs that you mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. There's no discussion online that I can find to expand on bullet points, which is how it's presented. Am I correct? And if so, could you do something about that? Because, for example, one of the things that is not supported is a range of what could just be constants. But in fact, I think the intention is to indicate that there's a whole bunch of functionality around the use of a constant like that is not actually available. So, you've provided a bullet point. Can you provide a discussion that expands on that, please?
Yeah, that's actually good feedback. We're working right now with our documentation team to help us revamp those pages to provide a little bit more detail back out. We've done the first round of it this week, which is providing more fuller details around what's supported, and the next iterations is to clean it up and then provide a little bit more specifics to what you said, what that means for you, right? So this isn't supported, well, what does that mean? So we are looking to actively always continually improve those pages.
Okay.
Just to that point, if you did ever have any questions, we have a support form online specifically for Android Runtime, so it's a community-based support form, so I'm always in there kind of looking at
Where
questions.
is that? That was one of my questions.
Yeah, so if you go to our BlackBerry developer website, at the top there's a link to go into our forums. And it's general development forums for all of our platforms, but we do have a specific area for Android runtime development. And so we have various BlackBerry experts that monitor it, as well as other community members to help answer questions. And that can be anything from having an issue with one of our tools, or a question around supportability, or I'm having trouble with some code, please take a look at it. So it's a pretty good form to help provide feedback as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Where some functionality is not supported on Android but is supported on native, is there... Okay, this is probably, I'm asking you for a statement of general capabilities rather than specifics, but is there a way of somehow linking an Android app where perhaps the bulk of an app's functionality resides with a native app? So, for example, if there's an OS callback that's not supported in Android but is supported in native, would there be... can you think of any way that you could enable those two separate applications to bridge in some way through memory or through sockets or whatever it might be that will enable them to communicate?
Yeah. Unfortunately, probably not from the end developer's use end. That's something that we're always actively trying to do on the runtime level. So as different native services come up that we can map to functionality, that's what we've been doing to provide additional API support. So instead of you having to change anything in your application, we'll map it on the back end. And so right now it's kind of time and money. There's a lot of things that we want to bring in, but it's finding the resources and times. And just as any new platform, there's been a lot of changes to get it up to this point. So now that they're there and they're stabilized, will be easy. It'll be a little bit easier, should be easier for us to. The idea is hopefully add in a bunch of new stuff over this year.
Okay, but if I understand you correctly, you're saying that as a general statement of principle, there is no mechanism to link a native app with an Android app to provide complementary functionality?
No, not today. Other than sharing, which we are looking to add, but not programmatically.
And I don't know if this will appeal to everyone in the room. Headless applications are not supported on BB10 yet. and the same appears to be true with Android, although I think the context is slightly different. I understand that an Android app on BB10 cannot be auto-run on reboot, for example, and in fact it requires the user to invoke the application.
Yep. And that's true for native apps as well.
Currently, as I understand it, yes. Is there any likelihood that will change for Android apps, or is there a workaround in the short term, a way of kind of tricking?
So there isn't a workaround. It's just something that it was one of those features that they know that they needed to implement, but they wanted to get it right. So they are looking at, and I believe that was one of the future roadmap items they discussed at the general session. There's actually a session today at, I believe it's 4:30, that we're going to talk about all the future items across the board, so Cascades and Android and Air and all the platforms. We'll discuss that. But the one around headless apps and auto starting, my intention would be is Android will support it when native does. So once it's available, that'll make that push, because there's no reason why they wouldn't. They say, okay, native apps can do that, but runtimes can't. It's just that it has to be there on the platform.
Thank you. And unless I hear a groan, I'll have one more if you don't mind. BES deployment of Android apps is never going to happen, as far as I understand it.
Well, I wouldn't say never, but right now we're not currently looking at it.
Okay.
I'm actively just making sure that we can understand any sort of business opportunity around the ask for it, and we haven't seen enough interest to do that.
So as a workaround to that, is there a way that you could deploy a native app whose sole purpose is to install an Android app?
I don't know. I'm going to probably go on the realm of saying no, but even if you were to find a way to install an Android apps won't function in the work perimeter. Even if you could install an app, which I don't believe you can, they won't run. So they only live in the personal perimeter.
But you could deploy a BES app that either goes into the personal perimeter if that's possible, and even if it isn't, maybe it could install an Android app into the personal perimeter. I don't know if that's getting complicated.
I would doubt it. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Yeah. So to that point, one application cannot install another application.
Whether it's native or WebWorks or anything, it's just a security thing.
Hey there. I know this will be more important with Jelly Bean, but what's the story re Android UI hardware acceleration? And is there any plan for that?
Android UI hardware. Yeah, it's coming with Jelly Bean.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? We have one up front.
I was just curious that in the business part you don't support Android apps. Is it for security measures? And if so, why wasn't opted for a limited sandbox operation mode?
Yeah, that one's it's not just for security reasons. There's business reasons behind it. Just not many customers were developing Android applications. There's a whole bunch of reasons why architecturally and all that stuff. So again, I won't say it's never happening, but it's definitely, we have a lot of other priorities first that we want to tackle. At some point, if we have enough interest, we'll go down that road and look to support it. But right now, it's not at the forefront of our list. Bringing up Jelly Bean and adding in full compatibility. We want to bring in Bluetooth, NFC, all the good stuff that you'd expect from a proper full functioning runtime. So those are the higher priority items. And then depending on how that goes and any sort of feedback we get from the enterprise community, once BlackBerry 10 starts deploying, then we'll perhaps look at what that will take. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you, everybody. Just to let you know, we do have one of our Android runtime developers in the audience, so if you do have any more specific questions and you want to pick his brain about something, you can stay around and we'll be here until the hour's up or outside. So thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming to the session. And hopefully you enjoy the rest of your day and all the other sessions you attend here.